Thank you for bearing with us. We'll start as soon as one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle shows up. By rule, we're required to have one from each party, and hopefully one's on the way. The Subcommittee on Research and Science Education will come to order. Good morning. Welcome to today's hearing entitled NSF Major Multi-User Research Facilities Management, Ensuring Fiscal Responsibility and Accountability. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the planning, management, operations, and stewardship of major multi-user research facilities funded through the National Science Foundation. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. We are all pleased to have all of our witnesses joining us this morning to continue our discussion concerning oversight of the NSF's multi-user equipment and facilities. I look to my colleague, Mr. Lipinski, and my fellow subcommittee members on both sides of the aisle to work with us to continue to ensure the subcommittee performs its legislative oversight and investigative duties with due diligence on matters within its jurisdiction throughout the 112th Congress, and as always, appreciate their valued experience and insights. As mentioned in our last hearing, investments in major multi-user research facilities comprise approximately 15% of the National Science Foundation's portfolio. The total FY13 National Science Foundation budget request for major multi-user research facilities is $1.1 billion. Of that amount, $196 million is requested for the major research equipment and facilities construction line item, and $923 million is requested for the research and related activities line item. We looked primarily at the major research equipment and facilities construction account in our last hearing. This hearing will focus more on the research and related activities funding side, as those funds support the operations and maintenance of existing facilities, federally funded research and development centers, and planning and development activities. Major multi-user facilities can include telescopes, accelerators, distributed instrumentation networks and arrays, and research vessels. This research infrastructure has a significant impact on large segments of the science and engineering population. We in Congress need to ensure the planning, operations, management, and overall stewardship of these projects is being carried out responsibly and in the best interest of the American taxpayer. The National Science Board and National Science Foundation are currently involved in examining the process of recompetition for these major multi-user facilities in order to assure the best use of National Science Foundation funds for supporting research and education. Our hearing today will look at the way these facilities are run and managed, as well as the issue of recompetition. I am eager to hear more about how these important facilities are managed, including recompetition practices, and to discuss how we in Congress can continue to support these worthwhile endeavors while ensuring financial and fiscal responsibility. The Chair now recognizes Mr. Lipinski for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. As I stated last month's hearing on NSF's MREFC account, how we prioritize, fund, manage, and oversee major research facilities, and also how we balance facility funding with research grant funding, are all important subjects for oversight by our subcommittee. So I'm pleased that we're having this series of hearings. At last month's hearing, we had a very interesting discussion about facility planning and construction, including how facility managers calculate and manage contingency budgets and how NSF oversees the whole process. So today's hearing begins where the last one left off. My understanding is that this hearing is not the result of any specific oversight concern, but rather a broad examination of the status of NSF's policies for and oversight of the management and operations of large facilities. It's been about 10 years since the subcommittee last formally reviewed NSF's facilities policies, and much has changed in interim. Most importantly, I wasn't on the subcommittee or even in Congress 10 years ago, and neither was the chairman. So I appreciate the effort by the chairman to educate subcommittee members on where things stand so that we will be better equipped to anticipate and mitigate any problems in the future. To that end, the policy topic today is of particular interest to me is recompetition of management contracts. In 2008, the National Science Board strongly endorsed a recompetition policy for major facilities awards. How this is to be implemented across the full spectrum of facility types and management structures remains unresolved. How would recompetition work for the Mag Lab or CHESS, for example, which physically sit on land owned by the respective universities that manage them. How would recompetition work for any of the facilities with significant international partnerships? I'd also like to discuss the process for decommissioning user facilities. That includes how a decision to decommission a facility is made and how decommissioning costs are allocated. Without an agency or board witness present, I don't think we can get into a full discussion of recompetition or decommissioning policy this morning. But I certainly would be interested to hear this panel's perspectives on these issues so that we can further pursue it with the agency itself. With that, I look forward to hearing about each of your respective facilities, both the exciting science you're doing and your stewardship of taxpayer dollars that support these facilities. With that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I would like to introduce our witness panel for today's hearing. Our first witness will be Dr. Ethan J. Schreier, President of the Associated Universities Incorporated. Associated Universities Incorporated manages the National Radio Astronomy Observatory for the National Science Foundation and is the North American executive for the International Atacama Large Millimeter Array under construction in northern Chile. Our second witness is Dr. William S. Smith, Jr., President of the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy. At the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, Dr. Smith acts as the Chief Executive Officer and sets the overall direction and policy for the Space Telescope Science Institute, the International Gemini Program, the National Optical Astronomy Observatory, and the National Solar Observatory. Our third witness is Dr. David Divins. He is the Vice President and Director of the Ocean Drilling Programs at the Consortium for Ocean Leadership Incorporated. Dr. Divins serves as the Program Director and Principal Investigator of the System Integration Contract for the Integrated Ocean Drilling Program. Our fourth witness is Dr. Gregory S. Bollinger. Is that how do you pronounce it? Exactly. Thank you. The Director of the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory and Professor of Physics at Florida State University and the University of Florida. Dr. Bollinger is responsible for all three campuses of the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory, the headquarters at Florida State University, the Pulsed Magnet Laboratory at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the Ultra-Low Temperature and Magnetic Resonance Imaging Laboratories at the University of Florida. Our final witness is Dr. Sol Michael Gruner, the Director of the Cornell High Energy Synchrotron Source and the John L. Wetherill Professor of Physics at Cornell University. In 1997, Dr. Gruner joined Cornell University as Director and Principal Investigator of the Cornell High Energy Synchrotron Source Facility, and as a faculty member in the Physics Department in the Laboratory of Applied and Solid State Research. As our witnesses should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes each, after which the members of the committee will have 5 minutes each to ask questions. Given our time availability and are having at this point 3 congressmen, while we prefer that you limit yourself to 5 minutes, you'll be given a little bit of latitude, as will the congressmen as they ask questions. So with that, I now recognize our first witness, Dr. Ethan Schreier. Dr. Schreier, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks, Ranking Member Lipinski, distinguished members. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm Ethan Schreier, President of AUI. It's a nonprofit research management corporation that operates the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, NRAO, under cooperative agreement with NSF. AUI's stated mission is to promote education, discovery, and innovation by uniting resources of universities, research organizations, and the government in building and operating forefront multi-user scientific facilities. We've been in operation since the 1946. NRAO provides transformational scientific capabilities in radio astronomy that enable astronomers to answer fundamental questions about the universe. Radio astronomy has opened new vistas into the universe, uncovering birthplaces of stars and planets, studying supermassive black holes, neutron stars, gravitational waves, and the remnant heat of the Big Bang. AUI created NRAO over 50 years ago at the request of the university research community NRAO has been the world's premier radio astronomy observatory ever since. Under AUI stewardship, NRAO has built and operated the most advanced radio telescopes in the world, developed state-of-the-art technology, brought benefits to the public, promoting science, technology, and engineering and math education. NRAO currently operates 4 unique world-leading telescopes. The iconic Very Large Array in New Mexico, the Very Large Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, the transcontinental Very Long Baseline Array, which has 10 dishes spread over 5,000 miles across the U.S. from the Virgin Islands to Hawaii, and, of course, the new International Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, ALMA, in Chile, at an altitude of 16,000 feet, for which AUI is the North American lead. AUI closely manages NRAO via very active governments, with continuing technical, programmatic, fiscal review and oversight, and close communication with both NSF and with the research community. Public support for fundamental research has consistently resulted in very practical benefits as well to the nation. For example, NRAO pioneered technology that's later adopted for medical imaging, technology used with cell phones. AUI and NRAO also actively lever radio astronomy investments to promote STEM education, as I mentioned, with proven outreach and dissemination activities across the country. For example, in the NSF-funded Pulsar Search Collaboratory, high school students, and for that matter their teachers, search for pulsars using NRAO data and then can publish their discoveries with active astronomers. Surveys have shown that female students in particular gain substantial confidence in math and science after participating. Other programs we have allow student interns to learn by working at NRAO in engineering as well as science. The current fiscal environment presents a unique challenge to AUI in maintaining its status as the world's forefront radio observatory. We may, for the first time in our history, be forced to close a telescope that's still a forefront observatory, one of the leading observatories of the world. Previously, NRAO would retire telescopes only after they became obsolete. This chart shows that we've retired 7. None of NRAO's first-generation telescopes dating back to the 50s, 60s, 70s are still in operation. To protect the operation of our current world-leading facilities, we are actively continuing to seek external partners and leverage their contributions to maintain leadership. U.S. leadership. U.S. leadership and our core competence in radio astronomy, which we do have, is also threatened by the potential split of domestic NRAO facilities in ALMA. The National Science Board issued a resolution urging recompetition of ALMA separately from the rest of NRAO when the cooperative agreement with NSF is completed next year. Separating ALMA from NRAO would put the success of ALMA at great risk, compromising 3 decades of work by experienced and expert NRAO staff in the planning of ALMA, the design, the construction, the operation, working in close collaboration with the astronomy community and our foreign partners. It would result in an enormous loss of efficiency and expertise, increased complexity and cost, and put U.S. scientists at a disadvantage in the International ALMA Partnership in using the facility. AUI sees its role as ensuring that U.S. researchers reap the benefits of the large U.S. investment in ALMA, the world's newest and most transformational radio facility. AUI's NRAO has been a pioneer in radio astronomy for 56 years now. The experience gained in building and operating the world's leading radio facilities is guiding our way forward in these rather difficult fiscal times. Our goal is to keep U.S. in the lead of this key scientific discipline and continue unlocking the secrets of the universe. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I provide additional details and recommendation in my written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schreier. The chair now recognizes Dr. Smith for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks, Mr. Lipinski, and other members of the committee. It's a privilege to be able to testify to this committee. It plays such an important role in looking at the balance of investments within the NSF. So this is a very useful hearing for you to have called. I'll use acronyms if you permit. Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, or AURA, is a consortium of universities, and we manage the optical telescopes, which are different from the radio telescopes. They look different, they are placed in different locations, but many of the things that Dr. Schreier said also apply to the telescopes that we manage. Our facilities are open to all researchers on a peer review basis. The NSF and ORA partnered in the late 1950s to provide an alternative to what was then only privately operated telescopes. And they did this to ensure broad community participation and access. This decision was extremely important and has been fundamental to the development of astronomy in the U.S. Since that time. Ours, and I would also say Dr. Schreier's, are the publicly funded and publicly available telescopes, and in the optical area, they are the only ones. So they are extremely important in serving that role. The nurturing of strong national organizations that can support the NSF mission and that of the science community to fulfill its potential is a mutual goal of both the NSF and the ORA, and we work very closely together in partnership to do that. So you are, in this hearing, paying attention to the facilities that precede the future construction, that feed in many cases, to future construction projects. We have really worked with the NSF a very long time on trying to develop a policy that works well to make that transition. Our observatories, like many others in the NSF that are in this pot of money called research infrastructure, have declined in budget over the past couple of years. So I know today is not one that you want to dwell on the budget, but it is true that the declining percentage of the NSF budget in research infrastructure is a concern. Earlier this week, NOAO was forced to terminate about 10% of its workforce because of the belt tightening, and we'll have to do this for Gemini in the future. I expect other observatories will go through the same issue. But I do want to address some of the policy issues that you mentioned. First, the issue of recompetition. I would start by saying the primary goal that the NSF should have is building strong, effective national organizations that work with the community and fulfill the NSF mission. Recompetition is one tool to affect that, but I wouldn't say it was the only tool or even the most important one. But if you start from that first premise, what do we need to do to make AUI or ORA a very effective leader in developing the community, recompetition comes into play. And so we do acknowledge the value of this, but there are many circumstances in which you would make a different decision other than recompete the contract. And this was certainly the issue that Dr. Schreier mentioned with ALMA and NRAO. So there are other features of this overall goal that I think should be examined before the decision to recompete is actually made. The second issue was one of decommissioning facilities, and again, this is an extremely important issue for us. The NSF has a very sound and well-developed policy for beginning construction projects, operating projects. For decommissioning facilities, there isn't a clear approach yet, and I illustrate one such example in my testimony. We would like to shut down our facilities in Sac Peak, but just in terms of relative budgets, it costs about $1 million a year to operate, but may take $7 or $8 million to decommission. When you sit on Indian tribal lands or Forest Service lands and have to return those to their natural state, this can be a very substantial cost. And so decommissioning doesn't come for free, and my testimony recommends that some addressing of this be put in the NSF budget just as construction projects were. You asked about international collaborations. I'm almost out of time. It's very important for the U.S. community to fulfill its goals through such collaborations, so they're very important. I'll just end by acknowledging the second half of the title of this hearing, Ensuring Fiscal Responsibility and Accountability, and that's a prerequisite to everything else we do. We all know that. We work very hard, take it very seriously to get it right. I would say that it's a continuous process. The NSF has a very robust way of looking at what we do, our accounting processes. That's very appropriate. I would say that our systems are in constant change as we engage in this dialogue with the NSF, but I think that we have a system that fulfills your mandate to ensure this fiscal responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for your insight. At this time, the Chair recognizes Dr. Divins for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to testify this morning. The Consortium for Ocean Leadership is a consortium of academic institutions involved in ocean sciences, and we have been, through our predecessor organization, Joint Oceanographic Institutions, managing the drilling programs, scientific drilling programs for NSF for close to 40 years now. And the U.S.-supported scientific drilling programs are probably one of the Earth Science's longest-running and most successful international collaborations that we have. And we're continuing to open new doors, for example, with nonprofit organizations such as the Moore Foundation to participate in the scientific advancement for our program and for our community through funding, observatory instrumentation, and other areas to supplement the NSF funding. Ocean drilling has been very successful in itself in terms of a science, contributing significantly to a broad range of accomplishments within the earth science disciplines. It has advanced our understanding of solid earth cycles, revealed the flow of fluid and microbe ecosystems beneath the seafloor, and has gathered extensive information on Earth's climate history. The Integrated Ocean Drilling Program, or IODP, is the current phase of scientific ocean drilling. And IODP builds on the successes of earlier programs, the Deep Sea Drilling Project and the Ocean Drilling Program, to expand our view of Earth history and global processes through ocean basin exploration. And the ocean basins are the place to go and do this because they're untouched by human interaction. And so you have millions of years of Earth system changes are recorded in the sediments and the rocks below the seafloor, providing a unique baseline that we can then measure past and future planetary changes against. IODP is different from the other two drilling programs that have come before it in that it is a multi-platform program. It's as an international program. There are three drilling platforms that are involved. The U.S. brings to the table the JOIDES resolution, which is, again, that's our facility. The Japanese contribute their ship, which is the Chikyu, and the Europeans bring a mission-specific platform, which is a unique platform tailored to a specific expedition. The JOIDES resolution, or the JR, is the riserless platform, which is the technology used for the drilling, and it is the U.S. contribution, as I said. After 20 years of service in the ocean drilling program, the JR was modernized and retrofitted with funds provided by the MREFC account. The JR underwent a $115 million two-year renovation and returned to services in 2009. And this comprehensive refit, which extended the facility's life by 20 years, included the replacement of all structures forward of the derrick, which is basically the front half of the ship. A new multi-floor laboratory was incorporated into the structure of the hull, incorporated into the ship itself, with the majority of the science systems either being renovated or completely replaced. The ship now holds state-of-the-art analytical equipment for onboard core descriptions and equipment for a wide variety of microbiological, geotechnical, and analytical chemical investigations. Now, the concern is, Dr. Smith was talking about the change in availability of funding for these large facilities is becoming an increasing issue. When the JR came out of the shipyard back in 2009, the prices of oil, as you can remember, were skyrocketing and are still continuing to increase. And that has had a serious impact on the operation and maintenance budget that we have available for the JR. The result was a decrease in operational days from 12 months, basically 365 days a year operations, to only 8 months of operations. And this has a serious affected, possibly jeopardizing our international contributions to participate in future programs where the facility is not operated at its peak level. And the reality really is that for a small 20% increase, you could get a 40% more science and deliver much more groundbreaking and fundamental science. The other thing I'd like to say is that the ocean drilling program is nearing its current contract ends at the end of fiscal year 13, and we will be there's a national program at the National Science Board to extend the program for one more year with a contract extension, which then would be followed by a 5-year cooperative agreement with a complete recompete is the process here. And for us, the recompetition. We don't own the facility. NSF does not own the facility as a lease facility. You put in jeopardy, by having these recompetitions, you put in jeopardy that contract that's in place, that the cost may become prohibitive or out of reach for NSF given the funding levels that we have. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Divins, for your testimony and insight. Dr. Bollinger, you now have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Greg Bollinger. I'm the director of the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory and a physics professor at Florida State University and the University of Florida. The Mag Lab is a multi-user research facility that's supported by a partnership of the NSF and the state of Florida. It's a fine example of the benefits of a federal-state partnership. Since its founding in 1990, in fact, the Mag Lab has received roughly $500 million from the NSF and $350 million from the state of Florida. High magnetic fields play a critical role in developing new materials that affect nearly every modern technology. Our entire electricity-driven lifestyle, motors, computers, high-speed transistors, as well as important biomedical tools such as MRI, rely on the knowledge gained from magnetic field research. The scope of work currently underway at the Mag Lab is vast. It includes the study of new superconductors, batteries, and fuel cells with the potential to revolutionize energy delivery and storage. It also includes the search for new medicines and the crucial analysis of petroleum and biofuels that could lead to better fuel production. The Mag Lab has campuses at Florida State University, the University of Florida, and Los Alamos National Laboratory. Every year, Mag Lab facilities are used by 1,200 scientists from more than 100 institutions across the United States. Access is through a peer review of proposals submitted by users whose work spans materials physics, magnet engineering, chemistry, biology, and biomedicine. Funding for the Mag Lab comes in 3 competitive stages. The first is a full recompetition, such as occurred in 1990 for the Mag Lab, and per National Science Board policy, is expected again in 2016. A full recompetition is a winner-take-all competition to win the right to establish and operate the nation's magnet lab. The second stage of competition is our 5-year renewal proposal process. Each renewal proposal includes the development of a new and updated scientific vision, as well as a new zero baseline budget for the facility. Renewal proposals are peer-reviewed by both anonymous referees and an expert NSF site visit committee. It takes 2.5 years to complete each 5-year renewal proposal process. The third stage of competition determines the Mag Lab's funding on an annual basis when the NSF budget decisions are made. These decisions weigh competing demands on limited resources and take into account the annual evaluation of the laboratory's performance by the Mag Lab's user committee and the NSF site visit committee. Competitive review is therefore already built into the NSF oversight of its multi-user research facilities. As such, consideration of a full recompetition should begin with a formal process to determine whether a winner-take-all recompetition is in the best interest of the nation and the science. The process should analyze whether the present facility is underperforming or failing to provide the infrastructure and support needed for world-leading research. The process should also assess the cost of a full recompetition and the impact of a winner-take-all recompetition on future funding by partners who've already invested significantly in the facility. Future NSF recompetition policy must be flexible because every multi-user research facility is different. Each facility here today represents a unique funding portfolio, a complex infrastructure, and an equally complex relationship with its user community and its managing institutions. Each of the Mag Lab's 3 partner institutions contributes valuable infrastructure and expertise, including professors serving in management roles and research scientists providing support for user research. The Mag Lab's buildings, infrastructure, and equipment are not federally owned. As such, a full recompetition of the Mag Lab is a decision whether to relocate the nation's high magnetic field facility and build it somewhere else. As MagLab Director, I want to emphasize that I welcome the ongoing challenge of competitive review by both our users and our sponsors. It ensures that scarce resources are used to support the best science and the best management of important national assets. At the same time, given the complexity and costs involved in a winner-take-all recompetition, a flexible recompete policy is necessary. I thank you very much for this opportunity to testify, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bollinger. At this point, the Chair recognizes Dr. Gruner for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Brooks, Ranking Member Lipinski, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Saul Gruner, and I am Director and Principal Investigator of the Cornell High Energy Synchrotron Source, CHESS. CHESS provides X-ray resources essential to users working in physics, chemistry, material science, geology, biology, biomedicine, engineering, environmental science, and even art restoration archaeology. The X-ray beams are generated by an accelerator machine a half-mile in circumference in a tunnel underneath the central Cornell University campus. The machine uses both matter and antimatter particles passing through magnets to generate X-ray beams millions of times more brilliant than possible with conventional X-ray machines. The NSF-funded facility was built in under 2 years and started operations in 1979. It has since been repeatedly upgraded during competing renewals, which occur roughly every 5 years, to maintain world-class capabilities. These, by the way, are existential competing. NSF annual support for CHESS is about $20 million, with an additional roughly $15 million from Cornell, the National Institutes of Health, and related grants. The facility staff of about 150 people host between 600 and 1,000 user visits a year by students, scientists, and engineers from 38 states, territories, and 24 countries who use the X-ray beam for an extraordinary variety of purposes. The result is about 1 scientific publication per day of X-ray operations. The American taxpayer supports CHESS to fulfill 3 missions. The first one, of course, is world-class science. The second one is new technology development, and the third one is student training. Repeated NSF external reviews have confirmed that CHESS is extremely successful at all 3 missions. Examples of scientific results include fundamental work on fluid jets underpinning fluid injection in engines, basic pharmaceutical and biomedical science, discovery of new polymer, ceramic, and composite materials, studies of materials at center of Earth pressures, study of famous paintings, etc. Our users have won many awards, including Nobel Prizes. The facility is a world leader in developing synchrotron technology. Synchrotrons are tools enabling much science and industry, and for this reason there's a fierce international competition for technological supremacy in the field. Many of the technologies that have enabled the field, many of those which now are operating, for example, at DOE laboratories, were developed at our facility. We are world leaders in superconducting acceleration, X-ray detectors, optics undulators, and many more areas. Perhaps our most important function, however, is student training. Student training is closely linked to innovation. Our graduate students develop new ideas from concept through to implementation. They are in the control room and behind the shielding wall, meaning that they build the facility and learn how to make it better. This type of access is consistent with the university mission and is essential to training the innovators of tomorrow and the key to winning in the highly competitive synchrotron radiation field. In addition to receiving technological training, our students are immersed in frontier science, working with users from across the world and across the country, thereby equipping them for future leadership roles. A cooperative agreement with the NSF details numerous specific steps to ensure that government funds are spent accountably and responsibly. These include metrics, regular written reports, audits, and external reviews. I'd like to close with the challenge that I believe threatens the very existence of major NSF interdisciplinary facilities, especially at universities. As you know, the NSF is divided into divisions, each devoted to a discipline, such as chemistry or physics or biology. Now, consider the work of one of our users, Dr. Rod McKinnon from Rockefeller University, who used our accelerator, who was designed for physics, and the CHESS facility, which is funded by the Material Science Division. His work depended on apparatus we custom built using methods from astronomy and engineering. allowing Dr. McKinnon to resolve a seminal biological problem of biomedical importance, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Now I ask you, what division owns that research? It's a quandary. And perhaps it won't surprise you that each of the NSF divisions seem to feel that some other division should steward the costs. The path of least resistance, the path that I fear the agency is on, is to simply terminate broadly interdisciplinary facilities, especially at universities where student involvement mixes the disciplines. The temptation to do this is especially pronounced during tight fiscal times, when the easiest way to increase the number of grants that a division can offer is to decrease large facility obligations. I respectfully submit that this issue deserves your attention. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gruner. I thank the witnesses, each of them, for their valuable testimony, and the members for their upcoming questions. At this point, I recognize myself for questioning for 5 minutes. The chair will then recognize other members for 5 minutes. First question I have is for all witnesses. What perceived or anticipated benefits, detriments, or vulnerabilities could the research conducted at your facilities or the communities you serve face by a regular recompetition of multi-user facility operating awards? Whoever wishes to go first. If not, I'll start on the right with Dr. Gruner, but if someone else wants to go first, jump at it.
We have been recompeted every 5 years for as far back as I could remember. Because the facility is physically embedded in Cornell University and because all the equipment is owned by Cornell University, there doesn't seem to be too much in the way of choices. So we deal with every recompetition as existential. Either they're going to fund us and we will continue, or they will not fund us and we'll simply go out of business. This is considerably different than a freestanding facility where you can recompete the operation. The staff stays. In our case, if we fail the recompetition, not only do the operators leave, but of course the staff are dismissed. This helps to focus the mind.
Dr. Bollinger?
Yeah, I agree with everything my colleague, Dr. Gruner, said. In addition, for the Magnet Lab at least, because we have such a large involvement from the state of Florida, it's difficult to see how and why the state of Florida would be putting up 35% of the funding if they felt that every 5 years there was a winner-take-all competition. Of course, it's a double-edged sword. It could be that it gets everyone's attention. The primary point that I would make is that, as my colleague said, every 5 years these renewal proposals are not a case of showing up and asking for one's allowance. It starts with a zero-balance budget, and it ends up with a decision that really does determine the existence of the user facility at the university for the next 5 years.
Dr. Divins?
Again, I like to agree with what's been said. In our case is a little different than the rest of the panel, in that the facility in question is not actually owned by the National Science Foundation or by Ocean Leadership, for example. It's a contracted vessel that we receive. We work out, in this case, a 10-year contract with the owner of that vessel. Having regular competition could have a pros and cons in that model. If the economic situation is such that the vessels are not in demand, we could negotiate a nice lower rate on the facility. If the economic conditions are such that oil is booming, they want to use the ship for other purposes, then we risk losing the facility due to the making the cost of having the contract might be prohibitively expensive. So there's a balance there in terms of doing that as an annual competition. But the other part, in addition to the actual ship, is that we do have facilities that are contributed to IODP through our academic partners. For example, Texas A&M University and Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia. They provide in-kind buildings and overhead and other activities that, if you were to do this as a constant winner-take-all procedure, you could potentially be having to either build new buildings, hire new staff on a regular basis. So it really is a delicate balance between where are the pros and where are the cons to make an annual recompete process.
Dr. Smith?
Thank you. You asked the question from the community standpoint, which is appropriate, and I think that's really the community should be heard when the agency is making a decision to recompete. I'll go back to something that I said earlier, and that is if the first question is this organization serving the community in the best possible way, you start from that and then ask how can it be better. And I think there's one issue that I illustrate in my testimony, and that is that if recompetition precludes organizations from consolidating, which can certainly offer cost benefits and efficiencies to the community, then the recompetition is not in the best interests of the community. And that certainly can be, that is an issue that we face. Dr. Shire mentioned the same one from his standpoint. It's a common issue. And so in our case, we are willing to compete. I think we'll compete strongly, but there ought to be other avenues to allow us to restructure to be more effective. And when recompetition impedes those, then there should be some process for looking at the alternatives. The other issue I wanted to point out is that in many cases, for example, with our work with the National Solar Observatory, we are in the process of heading into a major facility, Advanced Technology Solar Telescope, which means that I am signing very large contracts and making very large commitments. It's inconceivable to me that you would have a process where I am unplugged and somebody else steps in to sign the same contracts. I don't know how that process will work. Again, we'll compete strongly, but there's a large uncertainty just in pure legal and logistical terms how you make that transition, and I have to say it's very, very daunting.
Dr. Schreier?
Thank you. I agree with many of the previous comments, especially Dr. Smith's. One point I could add to it is that in the case I was discussing, there are many complex international agreements involved in running these facilities. Some are government to government, but many are legal responsibility of the parties who are legally responsible to do the work, like my organization. We have agreements with Chile. We're subject to Chilean labor laws. If, for example, if ALMA is recompeted, if a new organization takes over ALMA, all the 300 staff in Chile have to be fired, given severance pay, and rehired by a new organization. The labor laws are very strict there. There are relationships with our foreign partners in terms of ALMA being a joint project. It's a very expensive project. We pay less money because other countries are participating, but we also have to negotiate from a position of strength with, for example, Europe, with Japan, in terms of how we support our scientific communities. The European organization is extremely strong. It represents 13 European countries. We have developed relations with them through the years, so we know how to maneuver this. A new organization will have to start from scratch, figuring out how to negotiate, how to work together. These are very important. These are very important factors that can't be ignored in a recompetition.
Thank you, Dr. Schreier, and the other witnesses. At this point, the chair recognizes Mr. Lipinski of Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciated the witnesses' comments on the recompetition. One thing I just want to follow up, hopefully very quickly, with Dr. Smith. I think you had mentioned a couple of times when we were talking about recompetition that there would be alternatives. Is there anything more that you can say on that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I thank you for asking me to be specific. There was something on my mind. The Astronomy and Astrophysics Decadal Survey a couple of years ago recommended that the NSF consider ways of consolidating the National Optical Astronomy Observatory, NOAO, and Gemini. They sit on similar sites. They serve the same community, but they are separate programs now. We thought that was a serious recommendation, and we certainly wanted to examine all aspects of that. But the National Science Board's decision was that when you take two organizations that are under separate cooperative agreements and somehow entangle them or merge them, then that impedes recompetition because of the coupling. And so we're not now considering consolidating those two organizations, notwithstanding the recommendation of that decadal survey. There may be or may not be, we just haven't had a chance to examine it, a tremendous cost savings. There certainly would be advantages for the U.S. community. It would be very difficult, of course, to accommodate all the international partners, but it's a situation in which, because the recompetition itself became the highest principle, the more important matters of just building a stronger, more responsive organization are things that are off the table. We can't examine that.
Hey, Dr. Schreier?
I would like to add to that. I think that's a very important point that Dr. Smith made. I can tell you from the mirror image standpoint, we are currently operating ALMA and NRAO together. We've been asked by NSF, because of the National Science Board's recommendation, to assess the cost of splitting them. And we have done that. We've submitted this information to NSF, and they're analyzing it. But the first year of the split would cost approximately $27 million more to separate these out. That firing people, rehiring them, creating new infrastructure, and it'll be a steady state of about $6 million more a year. So we're talking about steady state increase in cost of maybe 5% or so of the budget, and a first-time cost that's much higher. Secondly, the second point that Dr. Smith made, which I'd like to emphasize, by being associated, by having the forefront facilities like Gemini in the optical part of National Optical Astronomy Observatory and ALMA in the radio, is one way we maintain our technology expertise by working on the forefront instrumentation. And that's essential. If you're relegated to separating these away and having just maintaining things as the facilities that are and not the new facilities, then you lose your expertise. It goes somewhere else. And that's something I think the United States want to do.
Thank you. I want to move on to the issue of decommissioning plans and costs. And Dr. Smith has recommended that NSF consider allowing for decommissioning costs within the MREFC budget. And I just want to open up to the rest of the panel. Do you agree with this recommendation? And do you have any additional suggestions regarding decommissioning that we should consider?
Can I just maybe offer one clarification? Okay. I'd really like to see decommissioning, because it's a large one-time cost relative to your operating budget, be handled in some agency-wide budget, like MREFC, if not MREFC. But there could be some other agency-wide pool of money that you could use to address.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Does anyone else have any, panelists have any comments? Dr. Bollinger?
Yes, for the Magnet Lab, the issue of decommissioning, I think, is very different than for some of my colleagues on the panel. We have a sufficiently large number of suite of magnets that typically for us, decommissioning is getting funding for the next higher performing magnet. And so then we take the old one offline. It was similar to the graph that was shown for telescopes, but it's a much smaller financial scale. And so I don't see a need, at least for us, to have a formal process for decommissioning. In fact, this upgrading of equipment is one way that we get involvement by NIH and Department of Energy as we propose new magnets. So at least for the Magnet Lab, I don't think it's a budgetary issue.
Anyone else have, Dr. Schreier?
I can add to that an example of what was just said. In the Very Large Array in New Mexico, which is 27 antennas spread across the plains of San Agustin, this was the forefront facility built in, dedicated around 1980, 81. It was the best. It was the best radio telescope in the world. In the 90s, the National Science Board approved an upgrade, and for something less than, significantly less than $100 million, that same telescope was just rededicated 2 weeks ago as the Jansky Very Large Array, and is between 10 and 1,000 times more powerful just by virtue of replacing the electronics. So this has been a brand new telescope that's now in the $500 million class telescope, not developed not by decommissioning, but by just replacing 1970s vintage electronics and correlators and receivers with 2000 vintage equipment. This is a very powerful way to proceed, and it doesn't happen automatically, but it's a very cost-effective way to get new capabilities.
Dr. Divins.
I'd like to second that. I mean, that's exactly what has happened with our facility over the years, that as the existing infrastructure becomes dated, the MREFC program was the way to, we didn't have to decommission. We just reinstituted a new program and a new facility, and then as we got the latest state-of-the-art technology. It didn't have to be the same ship in our case. It was an open competition for any vessel, but it would have given us a new facility, and what we ended up with was much better than what we had, and we didn't have to actually shut down any facility. We just transitioned to the new one. And it was I think, a very cost-effective way to handle it.
Dr. Gruner.
I'd like to add to that. There doesn't seem to be a very effective process to consider the costs of decommissioning versus the costs of upgrading or replacing the facility if the need for that facility continues to exist. And it would be very helpful if, in fact, that were to occur.
Thank you. Obviously, each situation, each facility is very different in these considerations, obviously, and that has to be taken into account. So I appreciate hearing all the different perspectives, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. The chair next recognizes Mr. Tonko of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Gruner, from your testimony, it appears clear that there's a high demand for the use of the Cornell facility. Does the concept of recompeting this facility really apply in this case?
I don't think it applies in the same sense that it would apply to recompeting the operation of a standalone facility. Mm-hmm. And as I had mentioned, because the demand continues to be high, and because we either continue or go out of existence as a facility, the decision really is not whether we want to transfer operation to another operator, but whether there's enough service going on to the nation to justify the continued expenditure. So in that sense, a competing renewal makes a great deal of sense. A recompetition of the operation of the facility does not.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're responding to that in that hypothetically, if Cornell were to lose, who would you lose to? There's probably no other facility that would show interest, or?
I'm not quite sure what we would lose to. It's worth noting that the history of the Cornell facility has been complex because it started out actually as two facilities, one that dealt with high-energy physics. It was arguably the most productive high-energy physics experiment in the world. It went on for 30 years. And eventually that physics played out, and the NSF and Cornell University terminated that activity. We then looked at what can be done with the physical apparatus, because ultimately that represents a huge taxpayer investment. And it was clear that there's a tremendous demand, continued demand, for the X-ray resources, which also had been going on over that entire period of time. And that's what we would like to leverage on, where we feel we could best serve the American taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. And in your testimony, you described the process for reapplying to NSF. For the operating support, I believe.
Yes.
Is this a rigorous review?
Oh, absolutely. The review typically consists of a proposal which encompasses what you want to do in the way of upgrading the facility, what the new research focuses will be, why it's justified to continue in a unique fashion certain activities, or to create new activities that are uniquely servicing the country. These reviews are then sent out, or rather this proposal is sent out for written reviews. The written reviews come back, and a national panel is assembled by the NSF to do a site review. They address both the concerns that might have occurred with the written review and things that they might have seen at the site review, and make a recommendation to the NSF as to whether the facility should be renewed at all.
So I'm hearing that this type of review ensures that NSF funds are well spent on their given facilities based on information that they gather through the review.
I believe that is the case.
Can you think of any other interaction that NSF could do to either strengthen the outcomes of the effectiveness or the efficiency of the funds?
Well, I think at this point, the NSF has been struggling with the issue of what recompetition means for its broad portfolio of different kinds of facilities. Mm-hmm. I think it's very clear from where we sit at this table that no one size is going to fit all. The portfolio of facilities NSF operates are sufficiently diverse in terms of their ownership, the way they're run, who they serve, the collaborations that they have, that some flexibility and common sense has to be applied in order to make the system work.
And if that facility at Cornell were to close, are there alternate sites for doing the work?
There are facilities operated by the Department of Energy, which of course are also light sources. But the system that's evolved in the United States is that our facility serves a very particular function that complements what goes on in the DOE laboratories. If you go to every single one of the DOE laboratories, you'll find that many of the people who lead those facilities or operate the accelerator or run their beamlines were trained at ours because that's our function. We're an educational institution. We are able to train people by taking them behind the shielding wall where they can learn how to make these things work. It's not something that you could learn in a classroom. You actually have to have a hands-on operation. That's largely incompatible with the mission of a facility that has to be operating all the time to get the maximum number of users through.
And you mentioned a wide array of disciplines that the facility is offering. Can you give us a few examples of research outside of high-energy physics that are being pursued?
Right now, high-energy physics is not being done on the machine. All the disciplines that I mentioned in chemistry, biology, and so on are being done on the machine. So we have a very large base of people who are doing work on protein structure. These are the proteins that are the basis of much of modern biotechnology. We have a very large contingent of people who are doing materials research on new kinds of polymeric materials. We are now engaged with the Air Force in trying to build a capability to help them understand how metals fail when they're repeatedly stressed. As you know, you have to change the skin of aircraft regularly because there really isn't a good understanding of the failure mechanisms. We have a very vibrant community that uses diamond anvil cells. These are diamonds where you crush materials, try to make new kinds of materials that would then be metastable, the ultimate goal to make something stronger than diamond. The list goes on. It's very diverse. We had a group of people who are analyzing paintings. In the last few years, we've discovered a new Bruegel the Younger painting. We revealed a painting that was covered over by N.C. Wyeth. It's just a very vibrant place in that regard.
I understand that as an upstate New Yorker, so we thank you for the contributions you make to
thank you
to the country.
Thank you, Mr. Tomko. At this point, the chair recognizes Ms. Bonamici of Oregon for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask each of you a bit about what your facilities do to inspire students with regard to STEM education. I know, Dr. Schreier, you gave an example about pulsars and that you have interns, and you talked about AUI promoting STEM education. But I'd like to hear a little bit from each of you about whether you have outreach efforts and to any particular groups and how you bring students in and inspire them to pursue careers or to further their efforts in STEM education. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is an extremely high priority for us, and I think that Aura facilities, as the others here, offer a research experience for students. And so as they progress through their careers, whether they enter into the sciences or a STEM field or not, it's still extremely important that they see the working environment in which science gets done and that they see how scientists work, and they learn to think critically. Again, it matters less whether they become scientists, but they certainly need to understand how the sciences work. And so we do have a very active program of bringing in students. There is a program, research experience for undergraduates. We're very active participants in that, which is an NSF program. It is very successful, and I would say that although it's very competitive, the diversity of the students coming in is absolutely impressive. I think we all know that the future for the future challenge in the sciences is to make them more diverse, to bring in more women and minorities, because that we don't look very diverse today, but we know that we have to achieve a much higher level of diversity in the future. So we're all working on that pipeline. Our facilities, I have some numbers in here, but I will just tell you that we take it very seriously. It is a major, one of our major priorities.
Thank you. And others? Yes, Doctor.
Yes, I agree with what Dr. Smith said. The Magnet Lab has a Center for Integrating Research and Learning. So this is a team of professional educators who bring together the scientists at the Magnet Lab with the K through 12 programs and the undergraduate research programs. So that group makes face-to-face contact with 10,000 K through 12 students every year. We also have an open house annually at the Magnet Lab. We get 5,000 people from the general public coming through. We have about 100 hands-on exhibits. So there are programs that reach out to a broad audience. We also have programs where we're seeking to identify individuals to, if you will, get them networked and get that leg up. Among those programs is the Research Opportunities for Undergraduates program. That brings undergraduates in for the summer to work in a laboratory. We also have a Research Experience for Teachers program for K through 12 teachers. And in particular, we try to attract teachers, and the majority of those teachers come from Title I schools. We also have a COIN program, a Workforce Initiative program, where our scientists go out to HBCUs, women's institutes, and they give lectures. They talk about the research at the Magnet Lab. They have some funding that's made available that they can invite students to the summer programs. And we found that that's a way to really form relationships that bring undergraduates and grad students into the larger network of research in the United States.
Terrific. Any others?
I wouldn't mind adding to what I had said before. I gave you only one example. We have several. We also participate in the research opportunities for undergraduates. It's an interesting thing. One of the members of my board, who happens to be a professor at Cornell and a member of the National Academy of Sciences, was a summer student at Green Bank, West Virginia in the 70s while she was a student, and she became a scientist. We have visiting centers in both New Mexico and West Virginia. The Green Bank telescope in West Virginia is in the poorest one of the poorest counties east of the Mississippi, and has a very advanced science center, courtesy of our existence there. We have programs for high school students there. We've been expanding this to Chile. We've had a Sister Cities program with San Pedro de Atacama in Chile, with Magdalena, New Mexico. We have two interesting indigenous, not very advanced towns next to world-leading telescopes, and we set up a program whereby teachers and students have exchanged between the two. So people learn how these different cultures work, and also learn how to get interested in science, which they do. We've recently been, I've been personally talking with the University of Colorado, which has one of the better STEM education programs in the country, teaching teachers how to teach, teaching first-year college students how to get more involved with science and mathematics, to see how we can leverage the local programs we've done in radio astronomy to a national level of improving STEM education.
Thank you very much. And my time has expired. Thank you.
The chair is willing to entertain a second round of questions from the members, if any so desire. Seeing none, I would like to thank our witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments from members. The witnesses are excused, and this hearing is adjourned.